And I present to you former U.S. Congressman candidate Frank Kuchar.
Thank you.
There's no login in this.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay. No, I need somebody to hit, since I don't have a clicker,
Make it work.
I just need somebody to sit there and click the button for me. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Being a former preacher and a politician now, I got a big mouth and a loud voice. I don't think I need to stand behind the mic. Okay, go ahead and hit the, oh, you gotta see which, hang on. Yeah,
And while they're doing that, the way to,
You got PowerPoint on?
something to do, file to run for office. Frank ran for congressman against Joe Barton. TJ ran against Pitts. Several of us have run for city councils and school boards. All those city council and school boards, the filing begins January 30th. Every single one of you lives in either a city district or a school board district. Go find out who's up and pull a packet. Even if you decide not to run, go pull a packet just to stir the pot. You will freak them out. I guarantee. Okay.
Are you speaking from experience?
Yes. Yes.
she is the queen of hot stirring. Now, a lot of things I want to cover once we get it fired up and going. Gary's talked on some of it already, so we'll try to rip through this pretty quick. Let's see, you got the little flash drive. There you go. Yeah, that one there, yeah. The other two are my sermons, one from Christmas and the one that I got to preach tomorrow morning. Okay, yeah, go ahead and launch. Look, since baseball season starts up here in just a little bit, we'll go ahead and just going to go around the horn in Washington, D.C. Just launch the slideshow. Go to slideshow. Slideshow and launch it. And from beginning. And just hit the down arrow key how it started. There we go. Round the horn in Washington, D.C. Hey, we're going now. All right. Boy, what to talk about, what to touch on. There's so much going on. But first thing that's so much prominent going on right now, and first, go ahead and hit the down arrow key if you don't mind, Keith, is on first base, attacking the Second Amendment we've already been talking about. That is critical because if we lose our Second Amendment rights, we're toast. Everybody knows what the purpose of the Second Amendment is. It is not for what? Personal defense. It is not for hunting. It is not for sporting. It is to prevent the encroachment of tyranny upon our lives. That is the purpose and the reason why we have the Second Amendment, and I am so tired of hearing all these people. Mario Cuomo, you heard about his speech in New York, that you don't need an AR-15 to go hunting. No, but if I have military coming against me with a fully automatic M16, I want to at least have a semi-automatic to shoot back with. That's why we have the Second Amendment. That's why it's so important to get attacked. Keep going with it. And hit it again. There you go. Senator Feinstein, you've heard, is going to be submitting a bill. And basically, here's what it does. It's going to make many weapons illegal to own. My son looked at it and says, huh. Well, first two on the list, or the second and third on the list, and said, I've already got it. And they are just getting started. It's going to require more stringent registration. You're going to have to go and you're going to have to be fingerprinted, register the serial number of your gun, and on and on and on it goes so that they know exactly what type of weapon and who has it. Just like that newspaper in New York that published a list of people who had possession of firearms, intrusion of their rights. The government's not going to know exactly who has what. And if they need to seize them, they're going to know who to go after. There's going to be broad discretionary power given to the Attorney General. The Attorney General, our constitutional loving air coder, he will have the power to add whatever he wants to that list. And they are saying anything that looks military, anything that can be used by the military or police forces can be deemed a weapon to be put on the list that we cannot have. Now, there are some of our members who are not here tonight that are police officers. They have their own personal weapon. They have a Glock, they have a SIG, they have a Colt or whatever. Now, because they use their own personal weapon that we can go to a gun show and buy, therefore, because they use that on the job, therefore we could not have it. It can be added to the list. My son said, he says, Pop, he said, I've been trying to find some 30 round magazines. He said, you can't get them, not even from the manufacturers anymore. Because people are worried about what is going to happen. Go ahead, Keith. There are other proposals that have been made at various levels. Get a load of this. Some are proposing that we require, the government require us to turn in our weapons. Go ahead. There is another guy who is talking about just outright confiscation. Or a reward for turning in your neighbors who have a gun. Did you hear about that? Anybody hear about the mayor of New Jersey? One of New Jersey cities?
$1,000.
$1,000 turning your neighbor who has a weapon. Legally.
Whoa.
Sell out your neighbor. That is being proposed by a mayor of an American city. Which is New Jersey. I'm not going to say a whole lot about New Jersey. My dad's from New Jersey. But nevertheless.
I'm sorry.
Nevertheless, who would have thunk in this country a mayor of one of our cities would encourage his constituents to turn in their neighbors for something that's lawfully, constitutionally their right to have? Go ahead, Keith. Again. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. What part of shall not do you not understand? Now, go ahead. There's two parts of this amendment that we can look at. One, a well-regulated militia, then the latter part, shall not be infringed. The militia shall not be infringed. But there's another way you can read it too. There's another clause. The right of the people shall not be infringed. Two different groups, it looks like, doesn't it?
Yes, sir.
Maybe.
No.
Maybe not. Go ahead. Here is the point we'll see in a minute. A right to bear arms is a right as much as any other. People that think that we shouldn't have the right to bear arms, let me ask you this. What if the government decided you had to bear arms? You were required to have a weapon and be trained to use it. Would you like that?
Yeah.
What if they were to come along and say, all right, all churches will be shuttered, since Gary was talking about Islam, all churches will now be shuttered and you will only be allowed, if you want to worship, to go to a mosque. You can't do that. That's the First Amendment right. You practice your religion as you please. But it is just as much a right to bear arms as it is to practice religion for the dictates of your conscience. They are the same. They're not different levels. Go ahead. We have the threat of executive order. Let me begin. We have the threat of executive order now that Biden is floating. Well, if Congress doesn't go along, we'll do it by executive order. Executive orders are not for that purpose. That's not what they are for. That is not their history. That's what they were being used for, to circumvent Congress. And that, again, is where we see the destruction of our checks and balances and our three-party government. Who are the militia? We thought, is it two groups now? Listen to this. Trench Cox, back in 1788, is considered to be one of the most foremost authorities on the Second Amendment because he was there when the amendment was written and adopted. And he wrote a lot about it. He was in some of the administration, early administration. Here's what he said. Who are the militia? Are they not ourselves? It is feared then that we shall turn our arms each man against his own bosom. Congress shall, get this, have no power to disarm the militia. Who does he say the militia is? We are. And he says Congress shall have no power to disarm us. Their swords and every other terrible instrument of the soldier are the birthright of an American. The unlimited power of the sword is not in the hands of either the federal or state governments, but where I trust in God, it will never remain in the hands of the people. Unquote. So when you want to know what does the Second Amendment mean, how is it to be applied, go back and ask the guys that wrote it, that were there. What did you mean by it? Who are the militia? Who are the people? What do we have the right to own? Anything we want. Because we are the last line in the sand against tyranny. Period. Go ahead, Keith. And again. What is the purpose of the Second Amendment? Fear of oppression from a strong central government. But now, those of you who were in my Constitution course a few months back, this will be the material from that course. So anyway, bear with me. Somebody mentioned about Nazi Germany. The Nazi Weapons Act was enacted March 18th, 1938. And see if this does not ring a bell with us today. Go ahead. It required that the Nazis were given unrestricted power to decide what kinds of firearms could or could not be owned by private persons. Oh, that sounds so present-day relevant, doesn't it? Go ahead, kid. They decided what types of ammunition were legal and subject to control by the Nazi bureaucrats. Do we not hear that again today? What type of ammunition should we be allowed to have if we're allowed to have a weapon? That fall, they decided Jews should be denied possession of all weapons, even if they registered them and went through all the procedures they were supposed to have. No, even if you've done all that you're supposed to do according to this law, if you're Jewish, turn in your weapons. November 8, 1938, the New York Times reports that according to Berlin police, all Jews in Berlin had been effectively disarmed. Go ahead. November 9th, the next day, 1938, Hitler issued the following directive. All Jewish stores are to be destroyed immediately. Jewish synagogues are to be set on fire. The Fuhrer wishes that the police does not intervene. All Jews are to be disarmed. In the event of resistance, they are to be shot immediately. How did they pull that off? Because Jews in Berlin had obeyed the law and had turned in their weapons. They were like lambs before the slaughter.
Literally.
Literally. And the same thing, so we can't happen in America. Germans didn't think it happened in Germany. People are people are people.
Right.
And people who want power and want to control us, no matter whether they're German, Russian, or American, are going to be the same. Tyranny is not restricted to just one nationality or to one border or one country.
Hear, hear.
An armed populace is the greatest defense against tyranny. That's why it's so important that we hang on to our guns. As you said, our cold dead hands. Go ahead. All right, second base, abuse of use of executive orders. I think somebody brought this question up. Raising of Congress's compensation was done by executive order. Was that permissible? No. Let's take a look at this little document right here. Article 1, Section 6. Senators and representatives shall receive a compensation for the services to be ascertained by law and paid out of the Treasury of the United States. Article 1, Section 9. No money shall be drawn from the Treasury, where these people are to be paid from, but in consequence of appropriations, how? Made by law. 27th Amendment. No law varying the compensation for services of the senators and representatives shall take effect until an election of representatives shall have intervened. Law is a legislative action, not executive. And each one of these cases, ascertained by law, in consequence made by law, an amendment, and no law varying the law, legislative. Barack Hussein Obama had no authority by executive order to raise compensation. None whatsoever. Raising the debt ceiling. Now it's being proposed he could do that by executive order. Right? You've heard that? Mm-hmm. Article 1, Section 8. The Congress shall have power to borrow money on the credit of the United States. Raising the debt ceiling is what? Borrowing money. Who has the power? Congress. The President doesn't have any authority whatsoever. Now, they're going to argue using the 14th Amendment, Section 4, that he can do that. Well, let's take a look real quick. And I'm hurrying to get as fast as I can.
That's okay. Take your time.
Section 4 of the 14th Amendment. Now, where did this amendment come from? The 13th, 14th, and the 15th Amendments are what we'll have the post-Civil War, the amendments of the Reconstruction period, dealing with the rights of the newly freed slaves. But they ignore that history. Here's what it says, Section 4. The validity of the public debt of the United States authorized by what? Yes? By law. There we are. That legislative word keeps popping up in the most inconvenient places for Obama, doesn't it? By law, including debts incurred for the payment of pensions and bounties for services in suppressing insurrection or rebellion, shall not be questioned. It puts it into historical context. And they're saying that one of the validity of the public debt, if Congress doesn't raise the debt ceiling, the president is required or authorized or expected to pay the debt, and he can therefore go around Congress and raise the debt ceiling and do it. No.
Wrong.
It simply says that the validity of the debt cannot be questioned. That Congress is under the obligation, before they do anything else, to pay the debt. Everything else becomes secondary. Payment of the debt. Things for which they have become obligated. And that includes Social Security checks, Medicare checks, those type of things. Because they have incurred those debts, those obligations they have incurred. So the Democrats are around saying, Republicans are going to cut off grandma's check. No. That's a debt that they have incurred. Go ahead. Now, ordering stricter gun control regulations. Another thing is an abuse of executive order. So that is a danger that we see coming up here. Third base, repealing the 22nd Amendment. You all heard about that idiot up in New York? Did you hear about that?
Yeah.
He has introduced in Congress an amendment to repeal the 22nd Amendment. And the 22nd Amendment is what? Term limits on
The president.
the president.
King.
We need to have term limits on everybody.
Yeah, right.
But we're going to take them away. Hail to the king. Those of you who get my newsletter saw that's what my headline of my latest essay was. Hail to the chief or hail to the king? Which is it? That doesn't have a snowball's chance of becoming part of the Constitution. Because, as you know, become an amendment, takes 2/3 vote in the House, 2/3 vote in the Senate, then it goes to the states and it takes 3/4 state legislatures to ratify. That isn't going to happen. But you know what's scary? Somebody wants to do it.
Right, right.
And why now? Why not when W was president? Why not when Reagan was president? Let's go back and get somebody good. Why not when Reagan was president? Because Obama is our Lord and Savior, according to Jamie Foxx. How blasphemous was that?
Yeah.
He's our Savior. Do you not agree that we are seeing the same mentality towards him that the Germans manifested towards Adolf Hitler, and that the same thing with the Nazi Weapons Act in 1938 can happen here? We are seeing the same danger amongst our own people.
Just look at the man.
But who's gonna stop him?
We are.
Yeah.
Go to the next slide. Let's go to home plate. We can take encouragement. We can. And I promised Bruce I'd give you something positive tonight, leave you something positive. George Washington, against innumerable oppositions, he never gave up. Think about him. He had to fight with an untrained, ill-equipped, ragtag group of army against the most formidable professional army the world had at that time. He lost battle after battle after battle after battle. He had the British chasing him all over New England. He had to deal with horrendous weather conditions that providentially were taken care of. He had his own generals conspiring against him, wanting to take over being the commander's job. He had some of his most closest and trusted confidants turned traitor. Benedict Arnold was one of our most capable generals under him. And yet we know what he became. He had members of the Continental Congress calling for his replacement. He had to scrape and beg and plead to get money and supplies for the army. How long did our War of Independence last, you know?
8 years.
8 years. Good. I should have known that you all here would have known that. We think a lot of times people think, oh, it's just a couple of years. It was done. No. 8 long, agonizing years. Washington never gave up, never crossed his mind, even knowing that only about a third, maybe, of the populace supported our War of Independence.
3%.
He stuck with it. That, my friends, is our heritage. Those are the people that went before us. That is the DNA that flows through all who are truly Americans. And so when we get discouraged and we think, man, we're just not going to win this fight. Yes, we will. Think of Washington.
And that's
Think of
George,
that.
not DC.
That's Georgia, not D.C. That's right. Isn't it a shame that such a great man as that, his name, now adorns a city that is so corrupt and anti-freedom as it has become? And there's one more place. Keep with it. Thank you. God. No. Sean Hannity's borrowed the phrase from Jesus, let not your hearts be troubled. He uses that in his show all the time. Well, I'm going to tell you tonight too, let not your hearts be troubled. Here's why. I'm going to combine two scriptures for you. One from the Old, one from the New Testament. Go ahead. Though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, we will not fear. Psalm 46. 4, 2 Timothy 1:7. God did not give us a spirit of timidity, but a spirit of power.
Yeah.
That's why we should not lose heart. Think about the people that came before us. Think about what they went through. They didn't give up in order to give us this great country. How can we not then do the same for our children and our grandchildren? When I was running against Barton this last time, people asked me, said, well, why are you running? Remember, I told you 2 words, Megan and Caleb, my 2 grandchildren. My son's now married, and his wife has a couple of children, so I now have 4 reasons to run. I want my grandchildren to, when they're my age, I just turned 60 last month, so many years down the road, I'm dead and gone. They can look back, and if this country goes down, they can at least say, at least Papa tried. But if we can turn this country around, then they'll look back and say, thank God Papa did what he did. And each one of us in this room feels that same way. I heard you say that. And therefore, with that dedication and that purpose, what we have to do then is go out and get our neighbors, our friends, our co-workers, and have them get the same fire in them that we have. And spread this across the country to where the government won't even think about trampling on our rights and our freedom. So that's around the horn in D.C. So,
Question.
I just wanted to add one little thing because there is something I've held on to for many years, and whenever I start getting a little discouraged, I just hear these actors. Hollywood is mostly crap. But they had 2 stupid movies that had each of them one line. One of them was that Untouchables, but Sean Connery's character said, never stop fighting until the fighting's done. And then another little dumb one called Galaxy Quest. Never give up,
Never surrender.
Put those 2 lines together, and that's it.
no.
I'd like to answer a question that you asked Gary earlier. The question was, what can we do? And the bottom line is that comes from I'm only me. How can the little that I can do make a difference, right? But think about being at the seashore. You know, you can't stop the tide. So our job is to have every one of us do what we can, as long as we're in action to do something. You can run for office, you can talk to your neighbors, you can work with an organization that's educating, you can we can all do something. If what we do is what we can do because it matters to us, there is no way to stop us when we're the tide. And it is our job to make our view be the tide.
Be pitching the starfish back into the ocean. There's a little boy walking along the ocean, and he'd pick up starfish that he'd find stranded and pitch it back into the surf. And somebody came and walking by and said, "You're not making a difference, what can you do?" And I said, "Well, I did for that one, and I did for that one, and I did for that one." Make the difference everywhere you can, because there's no such thing as a small difference.
Yes, sir.
The Second Amendment, where it talks about our rights to weapons, was based upon having the equal types of weapons that the military had at that time. I see no reason for any of us, I know that there's no reason to have a bazooka or a rocket launcher or any of that kind of stuff in everyday life, but it should not be against the law, because that's what you're going to be fighting against with the federal government.
And if they come back to me, I want to have a bazooka.
The second point is, our 1968 gun law that was signed into law by Lyndon Baines Johnson was based entirely upon Adolf Hitler's 1938 gun law.
Not surprising.
That's what the word well-regulated militia means. Militia means an armed American citizen, preferably a patriot, please. Well-regulated goes back to the word regular armed. And when they say well-regulated, they mean we get the same exact weapons they got. If they got ARs, we got them.
All I want is my dues.
So, okay, folks, listen, we're running late, so Ricky, do you have, look like you're about to ask a question? No? Okay. All right, Keith, thank you. Thank you.
So you're aware, since we got a lot of new people here, we are very active. We're a small but active group. We run candidates. Amy's run for city council. TJ ran for state representative. We've been running people. We've been gathering viable candidates and running them. In addition, what I want to talk about a little bit now is a lot of the Tea Party people are actually starting to form the coalitions that we've never done before. Where you had a West Virginia group, Texans don't do that. We just don't do that. So what you're starting to see is a Texas-wide Tea Party, conservative, 9/12, whatever you call yourselves, are banding together, and we may have a state convention here in the next couple of months. We've had North Texas meetings, and we're beginning to develop those processes and how we're going to conduct ourselves. But it's starting to happen. You got to remember, these Tea Party groups are only a couple of years old.
Yeah, 2010.
The liberals been at this since before Wilson. You have to keep things in context. We get a little frustrated, and I will talk about a lot of things. So what I'd like to talk about a little bit now is a whole lot of people went down to Austin to try to unseat Strauss. We didn't make it, but we made a lot of people nervous.
This time.
This time. So TJ went down, Amy went down. If you don't mind coming up and just kind of giving us your general impressions of what happened down there and
I've already talked to TJ.
what progress we made, if any, and
I'll follow up.
how many friends do we really have? A lot of them backed out on us this last time.
I went down on Monday, left here. I don't need to introduce myself, most of these people know.
The new ones don't.
TJ Fabby. TJ Fabby.
I've watched your videos. You just ran
we-
for Congress this last time.
State rep, yes, sir.
Okay, now I recognize
Hard to recognize him because he doesn't have his hat on.
you. I've gone weird since I saw this political posters too.
We went down on Monday, left here about 8 o'clock, me and Scott Ezel out of Maypearl. Drove down there. We got down there about 10 o'clock because I'm a good driver. And we were having a good conversation. Got down there, met up with Amy and Charlie Hubbard, and went into Jim Pitt's office. We went down there with I went down there with two main goals. Try to elect try to get our state reps to elect a new speaker, and try to talk to lawmakers about supporting nullification. So the first thing we did was go into Jim Pitt's office, and of course his calendar was too busy. I've been trying to talk to that man for 5 years, and he has just got a really busy calendar, I guess. Because I never have gotten it. The only time I've gotten to talk to him is when I got to debating a little bit. So we went into his office, met with his chief of staff. His chief of staff had a Gonzales flag. Does everybody in here know what the Gonzales flag is?
Come and take it.
Come and take it. And that flag was made because Santa Ana had given the city of Gonzales, which there was a fort there, he had given them a cannon to defend themselves from Indian attacks. Well, then the Mexican government starts becoming more and more tyrannical, and the city of Gonzales has this cannon. Santa Ana says, hey, we're going to get word about you guys. We need that cannon back because we don't want you using it against us. So they made a flag, said, come and take it. If you want this cannon, come on. Come and take from my cold dead hand. Who said that earlier? Gary did. Yeah, Charlton Heston. But that's the spirit of that flag. Jim Pitt's chief of staff, after our conversation, that conversation with me ended up with me getting up and pointing at that flag and telling him he had no idea what that flag meant. Because Jim will not support nullification. He did not support the anti-groping TSA bill that came onto the floor of the House for a vote last session. He brags about a balanced budget that is not even a balanced budget if you start looking at the numbers. It's full of delayed payments that they delay one day so that it'll roll into the next fiscal year. It's full of budget gimmicks that basically order property assessments to be lower than they really are. And then they forecast less or absolutely no growth in our public school systems for the fiscal year 2013, which we all know it is not going to happen in Texas. Texas is growing like crazy. But his chief of staff will sit there and try to fill your head full of all this stuff that Jim does that's conservative, but he won't stand up. He won't stand up against this federal government. And folks, I think nullification is going to be our last ditch effort, because I'm of the mind right now that our federal government is lost. It's a lost cause. It's too far gone. There is no reining it in. We don't have the time. They are going too fast towards the edge of that cliff, and I'm not talking about the fiscal cliff. I'm talking about the liberty cliff. I'm talking about we are losing our freedoms by the day, and we have been for a long, long time. And we're almost out of them. You don't have your Fourth Amendment right anymore. You don't have a Fifth Amendment right anymore. I argue that you don't have a true Second Amendment right now. Because just what this gentleman that just left was talking about. If we were to get in a conflict with our federal government, we would not be able to protect ourselves properly, because they would have us outgunned. They have bigger and better weapons than we can ever imagine having. And yes, there are a lot of us, but you've got a tank coming. It doesn't matter if one bullet's hitting it or a whole bunch of them, you still ain't going to stop the tank. So I would argue that we've already lost a lot of our rights. And it is more important than ever that we focus like a laser beam on the methods that we can use to stop this. Texas is the biggest state in mainland USA. If we can get a hold of our state government and make our state government draw that line in the sand, it's going to be a lot less likely for the federal government to continue this encroachment. If we can get the state of Texas to stand up to them and say no more.
Right.
So we talked to Jim Pitts. I felt like I was banging my head against the wall, which I feel like I'm doing a lot. The next day, we had the speakers race, stood in line we were the first ones on the Capitol steps that morning at 6 o'clock. They let us in at 7. We stood in line until 11 o'clock. Finally got to sit down in the gallery. And David Simpson, the guy that was challenging Strauss, he pulled out of the race. But if you get a chance, Google his withdrawal speech. In that speech, he takes Joe Strauss's rear end and the leadership of that house's rear end and hands it to him. And it's a great withdrawal speech. I hated the fact that he was withdrawn from that race, but that speech was great, absolutely great. So Joe Strauss got elected, but not only did he get reelected, he got reelected unanimously, which really pissed me off. If I had gotten elected this past year, I would have been the guy to object to that, so that it would have given any lawmaker in that room the opportunity to vote against Joe Strauss. But because it was a voice vote, nobody got to vote against him.
Technically, it was by acclamation.
Acclamation.
So nobody spoke up. It was one of those, without objection,
Right.
this is going to happen.
So it was
Technically,
basically,
there was no vote at all.
right, but it's basically a unanimous vote.
Yeah.
So that was a lost battle, another lost battle. Then later on that day, I went down to meet with Senator Birdwell, our state senator. And Senator Birdwell has been really good for us so far. He's been rated as the #1 conservative in the state Senate. I have a lot of respect for the man. He's got a history that you can't help but have some respect for him. But we went down and talked to him. He wasn't in the office. We talked to his chief of staff, Ben, about nullification. There was about 6 of us in there. And it seemed like Ben was on board with us. But then we left after that meeting. We met with him for about an hour. Left, and we were walking down the hall, and I passed by Brian Birdwell. And he's like, "Hey, TJ, what's going on?" I told him why I was there. And I tell you, it really disturbed me, because I have so much respect for this man, and I thought that he was on our side on all this stuff. But he gave me this BS answer about nullification. Said that the 17th Amendment killed the state's power over the federal government.
What?
And what? Absolutely. What I want y'all to do is, how y'all are feeling right now, go home and pick up the phone on Monday and call his office and write an email to him, and he needs to hear from every single person in this room. The 17th Amendment did damage the state's influence over the federal government, because the state legislatures no longer elect our U.S. senators.
Right.
So it does damage the influence, but the 10th Amendment and the 9th Amendment is where state sovereignty is codified in the Bill of Rights. And the 17th Amendment did not repeal state sovereignty.
There's no language that says it did.
Absolutely. So everyone in this room needs to call Brian Birdwell and tell him that he has a warped view of the 17th Amendment and nullification. He also told me, which he is correct, that nullification never appears once in the U.S. Constitution, which is absolutely true.
The term.
But all nullification is a word for states asserting their sovereignty and saying, you are violating the 10th Amendment, and we are going to remedy your violation of the 10th Amendment. This is our answer to your violation of the 10th Amendment. We're saying no. So that was the trip to Austin. Frustrating, very frustrating. Before I stop talking, I want to ask y'all some questions real quick. And I want you to be completely honest with me, because I might point at you and ask you to tell me what the answers to these questions are. How many in here can name all the members of the County Commissioners Court? Raise your hand. How many can name, which I might have cheated on this one because I gave you the answers for both of them, can name your state representative and state senator if I appoint to you right now?
Mm-hmm.
How many know how many articles are in the Constitution? If I point to you right now, can you tell me? How many know how many amendments are there to the Constitution? If I point to you right now, can you tell me? How many know who the judges are on American Idol? If I point to you right now, can you tell me? Well, that's good. That makes me proud.
Yes.
That show's still on?
How many know who quarterbacks for the Dallas Cowboys? Who's the quarterback? How many can tell me if I point to you right now? Right, who cares? Absolutely. But the point of me asking those questions, you know, we've been talking about the Bible a lot tonight, and the Bible says in the book of Hosea, my people perish from that lack of knowledge. How are we going to fight these guys and hold them to the document that we want them to adhere to if we don't even know what the document says? How are we going to fight our county government and expect them to do what they should be doing if we can't even tell, if we don't even know their names, don't even know who they are? It goes for our state government too. We need to educate ourselves, folks, and we need to, and I know you've all got busy lives. I know you've all got jobs and you've all got families that you've got to take care of. But we've got to educate ourselves. We've got to do it. We talk about George Washington. That man led an army for 8 years. 8 years. Getting shot at, freezing cold. Freezing cold. How many men did they lose in Valley Forge?
Oh,
Over half, wasn't it?
it was over half, but yeah, it was over
And
half.
how did they
Several
die?
thousand.
Starvation?
They were eating shoe leather.
Well, they didn't
Frozen
have any
death. I know
shoes.
Benedict Arnold, before he became a traitor, was leading a division across the Delaware River, and they ran out of food because they got slowed down by snowstorms, ran out of food, started eating their dogs, ran out of dogs, started boiling their moccasins and drinking the broth from their moccasins. Now, folks, I know we've all got busy lives, we've all got jobs. But if those men could do stuff like that, then the least we can do is educate ourselves and pick up the phone and email people whenever we need to and pay attention to what's going on. And I just ask that every one of you in here do just that. No more, just do that.
Well, I've got a 30-minute closing speech, so we're done. I hope that you enjoyed this.